Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by putting you in a very specific headspace.
Okay, I'm ready.
It's a Monday morning, roughly 8:15 a.m. You're sitting in your car. You have a travel mug in the cup holder that is, slowly going tepid.
I know this feeling.
And in front of you is a sea of red brake lights that stretches as far as the eye can see. You move forward maybe 3 feet, tap the brakes, and stop again. You aren't really living in your city at this moment. You are surviving the friction of trying to move through it.
That is a visceral image, and unfortunately, it is the defining operational reality for millions of people. It's the commute from hell.
Right.
But what's fascinating is that this isn't an accident. It's the result of specific design choices made over the last 70 years. We designed our habitat around the automobile, and now we are quite literally stuck in it.
That is the perfect setup because today we are flipping that script. We're looking at a vision of the city that treats the car as a guest, not the owner.
I like that framing. A guest.
A city designed not around the car, but around the train, the tram, and the pedestrian. We are talking about transit-oriented development, or TOD.
TOD is one of those acronyms that urban planners throw around, at cocktail parties, but it's actually one of the most powerful concepts we have for fixing the modern city.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out if this is just a utopian dream or if it actually works. We want to understand this symbiotic relationship between public transit and where we live. Because on paper, it sounds great, right? Live near the train, walk to work, buy groceries on the way home. But I want to know the mechanics. How do you actually build it? Does it make money? And, does it actually make life better?
Those are exactly the right questions.
Yep.
Because there is a massive difference between building a train station and building a community. TOD is not just, plonking an apartment complex next to a subway stop and calling it a day. It's about density. It's about the psychology of walking. And it's about solving what they call the last mile problem.
And we have a huge stack of sources today. We're talking urban planning documents, case studies from, all over the world. Brazil, Hong Kong, Canada, and a lot of data on sustainable transport. And I have to say, some of the stuff in here really surprised me.
Oh, yeah. What stood out?
Well, usually when we talk about public transit, we talk about it like it's a charity case.
Right. It's a public service that's supposed to lose money.
Exactly. Oh, the subway's losing money again. We need a bailout.
Yeah.
But there is a system in our stack today, Hong Kong, that generates billions of dollars in profit.
It creates a surplus. A massive one.
A massive surplus. And it does it by acting as a property developer. It blew my mind.
It's a completely different model for thinking about infrastructure.
So we are definitely going to dig into how that financial magic trick works.
Yeah.
We're also going to talk about the half-mile rule, what people are calling the fried egg analogy.
Very tasty analogy.
And why some neighborhoods are literally hotter, temperature-wise, than others.
It's a complex topic, but I promise when it clicks, you'll never look at a city street the same way again.
All right, let's dive in. Let's start with the absolute basics, the definition. When we say transit-oriented development, what are we actually talking about? Because I feel like I see real estate agents slap that label on anything with a bus stop nearby.
You're right. It gets used as a buzzword all the time. But in the actual discipline of urban planning, TOD has a pretty strict definition.
Okay.
It is a type of urban development that maximizes the amount of residential, business, and leisure space within walking distance of public transport. The key word there is maximize.
So it's about cramming as much utility as possible into that walking radius. It's not just about being near the train. It's about having things to do near the train.
It's about density and diversity. You want a compact, dense urban form that feeds the transit system. Think of it as a two-way street. The buildings provide the riders for the train, so the train isn't running empty.
And the train provides the customers and residents for the buildings.
It's a self-reinforcing loop. That's the symbiotic relationship you mentioned earlier.
Okay, but walking distance is subjective. My version of walking distance, on a nice day, might be very different from my grandmother's version on a hot day. Is there a hard number on this?
There is, and it's surprisingly consistent across cultures and studies. It's called the half-mile rule.
The half-mile rule. Okay, break down the math for us.
So planners look at what they call a catchment area. This is the circle around the station where people are willing to walk to and from. And typically this radius is between 1/4 and 1/2 mile.
So that's about 400 to 800 meters for our listeners outside the U.S.
Correct. And that's really the sweet spot.
Why that specific distance? It seems very precise.
Well, it comes down to human patience and physiology. A half mile corresponds to what the average person can walk in roughly 10 minutes at a standard pace, say 3 miles per hour.
10 minutes. So 10 minutes is the psychological cliff? Is that the idea?
Pretty much. Studies show that up to 10 minutes, most able-bodied people are happy to walk. It doesn't feel like a chore. Once you hit minute 11 or 12, your brain starts doing a calculation.
This is a hike. I should just drive.
Exactly. You start thinking about the time, the weather, what you're carrying. So if you build your density outside that 10-minute circle, you lose the transit benefit. People just won't make the walk consistently.
That's a tight window. A half-mile radius isn't huge when you think about the scale of a city.
It's about 500 acres. That is your canvas. And how you fill that canvas is everything, which brings us to your favorite analogy.
The fried egg. I saw this in the notes, and I have to say I love a good food analogy, so walk me through the egg.
All right, picture a fried egg sunny side up. The yolk is the center. That is your transit node. The train station, the light rail hub, maybe a major bus rapid transit stop.
Got it. The bright yellow center.
That yolk is where you put your highest density. We're talking 6, 10, maybe 20 stories high. You want ground floor retail, offices, and apartments stacked right on top of each other. Maximum activity.
So the yolk is where the energy is.
Yeah.
Coffee shops, the dry cleaner, the entrance to the subway, little grocery store.
Correct. It's vibrant from morning till night. Then you have the white of the egg. That's the outer ring spreading away from the center. As you move out into the white, the density tapers off.
It's not a hard edge.
No, it's a gradient. You step down from those high rises to mid rises, maybe 4 to 6 stories, then maybe to townhouses or row houses until you reach the edge of that half-mile circle where it might blend into a more traditional single-family neighborhood.
So it's a gradient. It's not just a skyscraper drop next to a farmhouse.
Ideally, no. It tapers so that it feels like a natural transition. And inside that egg, the design of the streets themselves is absolutely critical. For instance, you need small block sizes.
Why do block sizes matter so much? A block is a block, right?
Not at all. Think about walking in a city. If the block is huge, a super block, like you see in some modernist developments, you might walk for 5 minutes alongside a single blank wall of a convention center or a parking garage.
It feels endless, it's boring, and a little creepy at night.
It's psychologically draining, but if you have small blocks with frequent intersections, you have visual variety. Storefronts change, you see different buildings, you have choices of which way to turn. It psychologically shortens the walk because your brain is engaged.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's about keeping your brain interested so you don't notice the time passing. Now, I want to clarify something, because I think this is where a lot of American cities especially get it wrong.
Go on.
I've seen brand new apartment complexes that are technically right next to a train station. You can see the station from your window, but to get there, you have to walk across a massive parking lot, maybe climb a fence.
Or cross a 6-lane arterial road with no crosswalk.
Exactly. Is that TOD?
Absolutely not. That is what we call transit proximate development.
Transit proximate. That sounds like a polite way of saying close but useless.
It's a failure of design. It's a developer checking the box. Being physically near a station doesn't matter if the experience of getting there is hostile to a human being on foot.
So transit proximate is just location. TOD is about connection.
That's the perfect way to put it. A real TOD has wide sidewalks, high-quality pedestrian crossings, maybe even raised crosswalks. It has bike lanes, and crucially, it has reduced parking.
Reduced parking. Now, that's usually a deal breaker for developers, isn't it? They think, if I don't build a parking spot for every single tenant, nobody will rent.
That's the old thinking, the automotive city mindset. The whole point of TOD is to make car ownership optional, or at least secondary. If you build a massive parking garage, you are inducing people to drive. You're sending a signal.
The signal is bring your car.
Right. If you build a great walkway to the train, you induce them to ride. You can't design for the car and the train simultaneously and expect the train to win. The car eats up too much space and money. It undermines the whole project.
So hearing all this, it feels like we were trying to engineer something.
Yeah.
That, well, didn't we used to do this naturally? I look at old photos of cities from, say, the 1900s, and they look exactly like what you're describing.
You've hit on a really, really important point. TOD is not a new invention. It's a back-to-the-future moment for urban planning. We are trying to remember how to do something we used to be experts at.
Okay, so let's go back to that era. The sources call it the Transit City era.
Right. If you look at the timeline between roughly 1850 and 1940, the transit city was the dominant form of urban growth in the industrialized world. This was the age of the steam train and then, more importantly, the electric streetcar.
This is before the interstate highway system. before the two-car garage became the American dream.
Exactly. Cities grew, but they grew in a very specific shape. They couldn't just sprawl out in every direction like a blob. They expanded along the rail lines. It was often called a pearls on a string model of development.
The stations were the pearls, and the rail line was the string.
Precisely. You literally couldn't build housing 5 miles away from the station because there was no way for anyone to get there. The car didn't exist or wasn't common.
So walkability wasn't a feature you paid extra for in a luxury condo.
Right.
It was just physics.
It was a necessity. If you couldn't walk to the tram, you couldn't get to your factory job. And that dictated the architecture and the urban form.
Like the old streetcar suburbs of the 1920s.
Perfect example. You see them in cities like Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago. They have narrow streets. The houses often have big front porches to encourage social interaction. And the garages, if there was a garage at all, were detached and tucked away in a back alley. The front of the house was for people, not for cars.
And then we stopped.
Yeah.
What happened? What broke that model?
World War II happened, and then the post-war economic boom. We shifted hard to the automotive city. We decided that the future was personal freedom, and that freedom was expressed through the private automobile.
So we built the highways.
We built the highways, we subsidized mortgages for single-family homes in the suburbs through the FHA, and this is the craziest part, we passed zoning laws that actually made the transit city illegal to build.
Wait, illegal? How can you make a neighborhood illegal?
Yes, through what's called Euclidean zoning. It mandates the separation of uses. You can't put a corner store here. This is a residential-only zone. You must have a 30-foot setback from the street. You must have 2 parking spaces per housing unit.
All the things that create sprawl.
Every single rule was designed to make density impossible and driving mandatory. We legislated the sprawl into existence.
So we didn't just drift into car dependency. We planned our way into it. We engineered it.
We aggressively engineered it for decades. And many developing nations often skip the transit phase entirely. They went straight from compact walking cities to massive traffic jams in the 1970s and 80s, trying to copy the American model.
But now the pendulum is swinging back. The notes mention a key figure in this revival, a guy named Peter Calthorpe in the 90s.
Peter Calthorpe is a huge figure. In 1993, he published a really influential book called The Next American Metropolis. He essentially looked at the mess of sprawl, the environmental damage, the social isolation, and said, this isn't working. It isn't sustainable.
So what was his proposal?
He looked back to the pre-war models and also to the Garden City movement in the UK. He helped formalize the modern definition of TOD, laying out the design principles we just discussed. The walkability, the mixed use, the density at the node.
So he wasn't inventing a new technology. He was just pointing at the old blueprints and saying, hey guys, maybe we shouldn't have thrown these away.
Precisely. The goal was to find a way to curb urban sprawl and reduce our insane car dependency. And that brings us to the present, where cities all over the world are trying to retrofit this concept. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the execution varies wildly depending on where you are.
Okay, let's do a world tour then. I want to start in Latin America, because one city comes up in almost every urban planning textbook I've ever seen. Curitiba, Brazil. Why is Curitiba the rock star of TOD?
Curitiba is famous because they innovated out of scarcity. In the 1970s, the city was growing incredibly fast. They knew they needed a mass transit system, a subway.
A classic solution.
Right, but subways are astronomically expensive. Digging tunnels costs billions of dollars and takes decades. Curitiba didn't have the money, and they didn't have the time.
So they were broke and crowded. That's a bad combination.
A terrible combination. So their mayor at the time, Jamie Lerner, who was an architect, came up with a revolutionary idea. They invented the surface subway.
Okay, subway.
They created the world's first true bus rapid transit system, or BRT. But, and this is the crucial part that so many other cities miss, they didn't just paint a bus lane on an existing road.
Right, because I've seen bus lanes in U.S. cities that are just a suggestion. Cars turn into them, delivery trucks park in them. It's not rapid at all.
Not at all. Curitiba treated the bus exactly like a train. They built dedicated lanes, often in the center of the road, that cars physically cannot enter, and they built what they called tube stations.
These glass tubes on the sidewalk.
Yes. You pay your fare on the platform before the bus arrives. The platform is level with the bus floor.
Pre-boarding payment. That seems like a small detail, but it's huge, isn't it?
It's everything. It means when the bus pulls up, multiple doors open, people flow on and off instantly, just like a subway. There's no single file line of people fumbling for change while the driver waits and traffic backs up. It makes the system fast and efficient.
But the TOD magic wasn't just the bus itself, it was the zoning around it.
That was the secret sauce. They integrated the zoning laws to match the transit capacity. Along these main bus corridors, they allowed the highest density tall commercial and residential skyscrapers.
Okay.
But if you move just 1 block away from the bus line, the allowed height drops dramatically. 2 blocks away, it drops again.
The fried egg again. But for a whole corridor, not just a single station.
A linear fried egg, exactly. It funneled all the new growth directly onto the transit spines. And the source notes that this was participatory city planning. They ran public education campaigns. They made the bus a point of civic pride. It wasn't the loser cruiser for people who couldn't afford a car. It was the smart, modern way the city moved.
That's a branding victory as much as an engineering one. And I see other cities copied this playbook. Guatemala City has the POT plan.
Yes, Mayor Alvaro Arzu implemented the POT plan, which stands for Land Use Management Plan. They built their Transmetro BRT lines and did the exact same thing, building tall, mixed-use structures along those arterial roads and using that same tapering height model as you move into the neighborhoods.
It's the standard playbook for Latin American urbanism now.
It really is. And you see variations elsewhere, like in Mexico City. They're in this constant battle for their life against air pollution.
So they're a bit more aggressive.
A bit more stick than carrot, yes. They took lanes away from cars to create busways, but they also have really strict regulations. They ban older, more polluting cars. They have no drive days based on your license plate number.
I've heard of that.
But here's the smart part. If you have an electric car, you get free parking and you're exempt. You can drive every day. So they are using both infrastructure and regulation to force a behavior change away from fossil fuels.
Okay, let's fly across the Pacific now to Hong Kong. This is the one I've been waiting for. The rail plus property model. You said earlier they made a profit of $1.5 billion in 2014. That just sounds impossible for public transit. How?
This is the gold standard of financial sustainability, and it's a model that many cities dream of, but few can replicate.
Why not?
Well, let's break it down. In most cities, the transit agency is just a mover of people. They collect fares, which rarely, if ever, cover the cost of running the trains.
Right. The fare box recovery ratio is usually something like 40 or 50% if they're lucky.
Exactly. So they have to go to the government, cap in hand, asking for subsidies to cover the gap. In Hong Kong, the MTR Corporation is a totally different beast.
How so?
They are given the land development rights by the government before the rail line is even built.
Okay, walk me through the transaction, step by step.
Let's say the government wants to build a new subway line to a sleepy, undeveloped part of the new territories. The land there is currently cheap. It's farmland, maybe some small villages. It's hard to get to.
So its market value is low.
Very low. The government grants the land rights for the areas around the future stations to the MTR at that low pre-rail market price.
So MTR gets the land for cheap.
For pennies on the dollar of what it will be worth. Then MTR builds the railway. Suddenly, that sleepy farmland is a 20-minute air-conditioned ride from one of the world's biggest financial centers.
And the value of that land skyrockets.
Through the roof. MTR then partners with private real estate developers to build massive residential towers and multi-story shopping malls directly on top of and next to the stations. And MTR gets a cut of the profits from selling those apartments and a share of the recurring rental income from the mall.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
Usually the city pays billions to build the subway, and a bunch of random private landlords who happen to own property nearby get rich because their property value doubled and they did nothing to earn it.
You've nailed it. That's the problem. Hong Kong says no, the public built the train, so the public, via the MTR, should capture that value to pay for the train.
It's called value capture.
And because the MTR owns the malls and often manages the apartment complexes, they get this steady, massive stream of recurring revenue from rent and management fees, not just from ticket sales. That $1.5 billion profit isn't from turnstiles, it's from being one of the biggest landlords in the city.
And the stats are crazy. Something like 90% of all trips in Hong Kong are made by public transport.
Which, in turn, makes the retail space in their station malls the most valuable in the world. You have a guaranteed footfall of millions of people walking past your shop every single day. It's a perfect, virtuous cycle. The transit feeds the property, and the property feeds the transit.
So why don't we do that everywhere? Why doesn't the New York MTA Just start building condos over Grand Central.
Politics, history, and property rights. In the U.S., the government usually doesn't own the land around the stations. Private individuals do. The idea of the government using eminent domain to take that land, not for the track itself, but for real estate development, is politically difficult
A non-starter.
and legally complex. But in Hong Kong, because of its colonial history, the government technically owns all the land and leases it out. So it has much more power to dictate these kinds of integrated deals.
That's a fascinating distinction. Okay, that brings us nicely to North America. We have a bit of a neighborly rivalry here in the sources, Canada versus the USA.
And it is a stark contrast. The source material notes that basically all major Canadian cities have TOD policies on the books. It is a standard accepted tool in their urban planning toolkit.
Vancouver's the one I always hear about. The SkyTrain.
Vancouver is a textbook example of retrofitting. They built their SkyTrain automated metro system, starting for the Expo 86 World's Fair, and they very deliberately zoned for regional town centers at the major stations.
They're just like Metrotown.
Exactly. Metrotown used to be, a pretty standard suburban mall. Now it's a dense, high-rise urban core, one of several in the region. And they have provincial legislation that effectively requires municipalities to plan for high density within 800 meters of rapid transit.
They don't just suggest it, they mandate it.
Right. And you see similar success stories in Toronto. The entire Yonge Street subway line has been a corridor of high-rise development for decades. More recently, there's been a boom along Shepherd Avenue after a new line was built there. It's just culturally accepted in Canadian cities that stations equal towers.
And the U.S. We invented the suburb. Are we getting any better at this? Or are we still stuck?
We are getting better, but it's patchy. It's not a national or even statewide priority in most places. It happens in specific pockets where local leadership really pushes for it for a long time. The standout success story is Arlington County, Virginia.
Right across the river from Washington, D.C.
Correct. Specifically, the Rosslyn-Ballston corridor, which is served by the Metro's Orange and Silver lines.
I've been there. It's really impressive. You come out of the Metro and it feels like a real downtown, but you walk 2 blocks away and it's quiet, leafy suburbia.
That's their bullseye approach. For more than 30 years, they have consciously and consistently concentrated almost all their new commercial and residential development within that 1/4-to-half-mile walking distance of the metro stations.
So inside the circle, high density. Outside the circle, they protect the existing single-family homes.
That was the political deal they made. And it worked so well, they received the EPA's very first National Award for Smart Growth Achievement, all the way back in 2002. They've been at this for a long time.
It's essentially the fried egg executed perfectly over a 5-mile stretch.
It is. New Jersey is another interesting case from the sources. They have the Transit Village Initiative, which started back in 1999.
How does that work?
It's a state-level program. The state government gives special designation and grants to towns that proactively rezone the area around their train stations for mixed-use development, pedestrian improvements, and affordable housing.
So it's an incentive from the state to encourage good local planning.
Exactly. It's a carrot. And they've designated about 35 of these transit villages so far, all across the state.
And then there's the San Francisco Bay Area, which is trying to catch up out of sheer desperation.
They have to. The housing crisis and the traffic are just crippling. They are forecasting something like 2 million new people by 2035. They realize that if all those people drive cars, the entire region will basically seize up and cease to function. So their regional plan, called Plan Bay Area, tries to funnel at least 50% of all that new growth into what they call priority development areas.
Which are just TODs by another name.
Exactly. Areas within a half-mile of high-quality transit. It's a massive, ongoing effort to retrofit the sprawl they created.
So the pressure is on. But I want to pivot now to the impact. We've talked about the what and the where, but let's talk about the so what. Section 4 in the outline. Does this actually make the world a better place, or is it just a more efficient way to pack people in? Let's start with the environment.
The environmental case is very strong, but there is a catch that might surprise you. First, the good news, which is emissions. A study in Los Angeles that cited showed that TOD reduces greenhouse gases and smog-forming emissions by about 30% compared to conventional low-density suburban areas.
That's a significant cut. Is that just because people are driving less?
Driving less is the biggest part of it, for sure. Fewer car trips, shorter car trips. But it's also the buildings themselves.
How so?
An apartment or a condo in a dense building is much more energy efficient to heat and cool than a detached single-family house. You have shared walls, so you lose less heat. The building has a smaller overall footprint per person. It's just inherently greener from an energy consumption perspective.
Okay, that makes sense. But you mentioned a catch, and I remember you teasing something in the intro about hotter neighborhoods.
Yes, this is the urban heat island effect, and it's a really important counterintuitive finding. A study in Brisbane, Australia, found that TODs can actually be significantly hotter than the surrounding suburbs.
Wait, hold on. We just said TOD is the green solution. Now you're telling me these eco-villages are baking in the sun. How does that work?
It's physics. When you increase density, what are you building with?
Concrete, asphalt, steel, glass.
Dark, hard, non-porous surfaces. These materials are fantastic at absorbing and retaining heat from the sun. And when you build dense, you often pave over the natural green space, the lawns, the trees, the soil, that would otherwise cool the area through shade and evapotranspiration.
So if you aren't careful, you replace a cool green landscape with a hot concrete jungle.
Exactly. And that concrete and asphalt holds the heat long after the sun goes dim, keeping nighttime temperatures artificially high. The lesson here is that you can't just maximize density, you have to maximize livability. Good TOD planning must consciously and deliberately include green spaces.
Things like green roofs, street trees, pocket parks.
Yes, permeable pavers, light-colored surfaces. You have to mitigate the heat island effect by design. You can't just rely on the train to save the planet. You need the trees and the parks, too.
What about the economics? For the businesses and for the people actually living there?
Generally, it's a big financial win. The source notes a study from Phoenix that looked at businesses near their new light rail line. They saw significantly more new starts, new businesses opening, especially in knowledge industries, services, and retail, compared to similar areas far from the rail. It creates a hub of economic activity.
And I'm guessing property values go up.
Oh, absolutely. A San Diego study confirmed that pretty clearly. Condo values reliably rise as you get closer to transit stations and as the walkability of the neighborhood improves, but the biggest impact is on the household budget.
So
A study in LA found that on average, residents and TODs save about $3,100 per year on energy and travel costs combined.
that is a huge chunk of change for a family. That's a vacation or an investment account or a big cushion for emergencies just from not having to pay for gas, insurance, and repairs on a second car or maybe even a first.
It's a massive location efficiency dividend. But, and here we get to the biggest point of friction in the entire TOD debate, that rise in property value is a very sharp, double-edged sword.
I think I know where you're going with this. Gentrification.
This is the critical conflict. This is the central challenge. We build these wonderful, convenient, walkable neighborhoods to be efficient and accessible. But because they are so desirable, because people want to walk to a coffee shop and take the train to work, the demand spikes. And when demand spikes, rents and home prices go up.
And the very people who arguably need the transit the most, the low-income workers, the service staff who can't afford a car, they get priced out.
Precisely. They get pushed to the outer suburbs where rent is cheaper, but now they are forced to buy a car they can't really afford or take a 2-hour multi-transfer bus ride to get to their job in the city center. It completely defeats the social equity purpose.
So is TOD just a luxury product for young professionals and empty nesters?
It can be if it's left unchecked, if you just let the market run wild. The notes mention that some of the early TOD ordinances in Chicago were heavily criticized for this. They were either built in already wealthy white areas, or they sparked immediate displacement in lower-income neighborhoods.
So how do you fix that? Because the answer can't be to just stop building things, right? That just makes the overall housing shortage even worse for everyone.
No, that's the worst possible response. The solution is policy. Chicago is actually trying to pivot now with what they call their 2020 ETOD, Plan Equitable Transit-Oriented Development.
So the E is for equity.
Yes. The solution is to mandate affordable housing as part of the mix, to use inclusionary zoning, to fund land trusts, to protect existing tenants from eviction. It's not just an engineering problem, it's a social policy problem.
So you have to build for everyone from the start.
100%. The rebuttal to the gentrification fear is that we need abundant housing at all price points. If we severely restrict supply, prices go up everywhere. If we build massive density with equity baked into the plan from day one, we have a fighting chance to stabilize costs and create inclusive communities. But the market will not do that on its own. It needs strong public sector guardrails.
Let's look toward the future then.
Yeah.
Section 5, where is TOD going next? Is this trend accelerating?
It seems to be. It's expanding globally into new markets. We are seeing massive projects in Southeast Asia. The sources mention Indonesia Jakarta is building a whole network of TODs with specific themes, like the Duku Atas transport hub that integrates multiple rail and bus lines.
And Thailand, too.
Yes, Thailand has major proposals for TODs around their new high-speed rail stations, trying to create new city centers in places like Ayutthaya and Pattaya. Malaysia and even Iran in Isfahan are using their new subway systems as anchors for this kind of planned development.
So Asia is doubling down on this model. It's becoming the global standard for rapid urbanization.
It really is. But there is one place that, funnily enough, doesn't really talk about TOD very much, and that's Europe.
Why is that? You'd think they'd be leaders in this.
This is the funny part, and it gets back to what we said about history. The source points this out, and I was talking to a planner from Copenhagen recently. When you say TOD to a European planner, they kind of look at you with a bit of confusion, because in many European cities, that's just a city.
It's not a special project.
Yeah.
It's just how they've lived for the last 300 years.
Exactly. Take Paris. The metro stations are almost never more than 500 meters apart from each other. The density of apartment buildings is remarkably consistent across the entire core city. The walkability is just baked in. The whole city is a transit-oriented development. They don't need a special acronym for what they consider normal.
That's a great reality check. We're over here in North America giving out awards for smart growth, and Paris is just like, built in a city for Tuesday.
Essentially,
Yeah.
we are spending billions trying to re-engineer what we systematically destroyed, while they just, for the most part, never broke it in the first place.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today. From the physics of the 10-minute walk to the billions of dollars in Hong Kong real estate. Let's try to tie this all together. What's the big story here?
If we look at the whole arc, it's really a story of technology and choice.
Yeah.
We started with the steam trains and streetcars of 1850 that naturally created these dense, walkable communities out of necessity. Then we invented a new technology, the private automobile. And we made a conscious choice to rebuild our entire society around it, leading to sprawl. And now we are realizing the immense costs of that choice, in time stuck in traffic, in money spent on cars, in carbon emissions. And we're using planning and policy to put the pieces back together.
Density plus transit plus walkability equals sustainable living.
That is the formula. It's not magic, it's just good geometry.
So for you listening, here's the takeaway. The next time you are moving through your city, whether you're walking, driving, or on a bus, look at the bones of the neighborhood. Ask yourself, are you in a yoke? Are you in the white? Or are you somewhere else entirely? Are you in a place designed for you, the human, or for your car?
And consider the trade-off. We are so often sold this idea that the car represents freedom. But think about the freedom of the transit village, the freedom from traffic jams, the freedom from gas prices and car insurance payments, the freedom to read a book or listen to this on your commute instead of white-knuckling it behind the wheel.
And I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. Our sources mention that opponents of TOD often argue that people, especially Americans, simply prefer the sprawl. They say we want the big lawn and the three-car garage, and that density is somehow unnatural or un-American.
You hear that argument a lot, that the market is just giving people what they want.
But the counter-argument is that preferences are shaped by the options you're given. So is that preference nature? Are we genetically wired to want a lawnmower? Or is it nurture? Is the result of 70 years of government subsidies, zoning laws, and massive infrastructure spending that made the car and the suburban house the only viable, affordable option for millions of families? If every neighborhood had a vibrant, walkable yoke, if the rail plus property model made transit fast, free, and frequent, would who even miss the drive?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It's a question worth asking next time you're stuck in traffic.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
See you next time.